Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. This week we're going to be talking about the World Eaters. The World Eaters are one of many sub-factions of Chaos Space Marines. The World Eaters in particular worship Khorne, the god of blood, war, and gladiatorial combat. You've almost certainly heard the war cry of the World Eaters. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. The Primarch for the World Eaters is Angron, the Red Angel. He is very angry. He is the angriest of angry. The World Eaters are a strangely sympathetic army. They really are a story of tragedy, as they have constantly tried to make their Primarch proud only to fall short every single time. On top of that, their Primarch himself was a slave forced to fight in gladiator pits and watch all of his friends die. But probably the most defining factor of what a World Eater is they are all about melee. They want to get in there with their chain swords and their power fists, and they want to kill, maim, and slaughter. So why would you want to collect World Eaters specifically? Well, World Eaters are the most melee of all the melee armies. Everything about them is get into melee combat, hit hard in melee combat, hit harder in melee combat. If you die in melee combat, still hit them in melee combat even after you have died. Everything is melee combat for them. Despite how one-dimensional that playstyle of get in and melee is, their army rule is incredibly flexible for it. You will either get in there and melee them even harder, or you will run around the board even faster so that you can run up to people to melee them sooner. They're also one of the only armies that can reliably kill vehicles in melee because of their combination of high strength weapons, high AP weapons, good damage profiles, combined with their access to easy wound rerolls, +1 to wound stratagems, lethal hits, sustained hits, and all of these things layering on top of each other. If you wanted to collect an entire faction for cheap, this is probably one of the cheapest factions that you will find, as they have a very small collection. So it's very easy to have everything in their list and then be able to mix and match however you want from there. This works out very nicely because list building for World Eaters right now is just some combination of pick every single named character, a few units of Berserkers for some of those named characters to go with, a couple of Rhinos for the Berserkers to go in, and then fill the rest of the army up with 8-bound, Jackals, and Berserkers however you want. If it is a World Eaters unique unit, it is good in World Eaters. And probably one of the best reasons to collect World Eaters right now is they are a very cost-efficient army to buy because of just how elite a lot of their units are. They have a fantastic combat patrol that comes in at over 550 points of units per box, and a lot of the units that you want to spam are over $3 per point on the tabletop. Now, of course, there are going to be some cons to collecting World Eaters. With such a limited pool of choices in terms of units, your lists are always going to wind up being some variant of how many Berserkers do I want to run and how many 8-bound do I want to run. Shooting in a World Eater's army is negligible at best and not worth even doing at worst. Enemies can comfortably stand out in the open and shoot you without fear of retaliation because your shooting is just so weak. You are also technically relying on luck for your army rule to give you exactly the combination of dice that you want. This is slightly offset by being able to re-roll certain dice depending on what units are sitting on objectives. Thanks to the icon of Khorne, which we'll talk about later, if you're re-rolling at least 2 dice, you have a 22% chance to resurrect Angron if he's already died in the battle, or you have at least a 76% chance to hit any single result you want across the table, with most of the results being almost 100% chance to get. It's very easy to reliably get your RNG mechanics. The army rule for World Eaters is Blessings of Khorne. This is a very, very long wall of text in order to understand everything that's happening. But the TLDR is you roll a bunch of dice at the start of your turn, and depending on how those dice rolled out and what kind of combinations of numbers you can get extra little buffs to your entire army for that turn. This could be something like +2 to move, advance and charge in the same turn, getting access to lethal hits, getting access to sustained hits, getting more durability across your entire army. There are a lot of combinations that you can get here off of these dice. And like I said, you have a lot of opportunity to re-roll some of these dice to make those numbers even more in your favor. The detachment rule for World Eaters is Relentless Rage. World Eaters heard that you liked melee, so they put some melee in your melee so you can melee while you melee. You're getting extra strength, you're getting extra attacks, and these are on units that already have a lot of strength and a lot of attacks. Now, I blazed through a lot of that because at the end of the day, World Eaters are a very simple army to understand. They want to walk up to you and punch you in the face. It is not a particularly complex game plan, but there are a lot of nuances to how you might want to play this army when you actually get to the tabletop because of cover and things like that. The list building is really where a lot of those decisions are going to be made in terms of how you think your army is going to need to get up the table to get in range to punch people. Now, I have a few different lists for you to take a look at for today, but every single one of these lists is going to be starting off with a World Eaters Combat Patrol. This box is great. It has a lot of Berserkers in it, which is exactly what you want to see. It has great supporting units in the Jackal, and the leader for the unit has flexibility to become either a named character or just be a generic leader for your units. When we actually take a look at how that 500 point list is going to play out, we're not going to be able to fit everything that we want to into the army. This is because there's simply too many points and too much value in this combat patrol box. So what we're going to wind up doing is we're going to be taking one World Eater's Lord on Juggernaut, making him our Warlord and giving him no enhancements. Then we're going to take a 10-man unit of Khorne Berserkers with 8 Chain Blades, 8 Bolt Pistols, 2 Khornate Eviscerators, and 2 Plasma Pistols, and then 2 separate 5-mans with 4 Berserker Chain Blades, 4 Bolt Pistols, 1 Khornate Eviscerator, and 1 Plasma Pistol. Important to note, anytime that we see the option of taking an Icon of Khorne with our army, we are going to take it. It is just too good not to take. The World Eater's Lord on Juggernaut is going to be grouping up with the 10-man Khorne Berserker unit just to kind of help give them that little bit of extra power while the other 2 5-mans are able to go around and do whatever they need to do for your small mission games. Now, this first list that I'm going to be showing you is the cheaper of the 2 primary lists. This list is going to be looking at using a lot of combat patrols, chaos rhinos, and things like that to make the most out of getting good berserkers on the field and still having some amount of cool big guys to run around and help us out. In order to achieve that goal, we're going to be picking up 1 Master of Executions, 1 unit of Exalted 8-bound, and 2 Chaos Rhinos. Now for the characters, the Lord on Juggernaut is going to be changed into Lord Invocatus, and the World Eater's Master of Executions is going to be given the Berserker's Glaive enhancement. This is just going to make him hit extremely hard and will be a staple of most of the lists that you will be working with. For the battle line units, it's going to be exactly the same, except now you're actually going to see the Jackals. The Jackals are going to be equipped with 8 chain blades in total, a Mauler chain blade, a Skull Smasher, and 9 auto pistols. They're mostly just there to stand on the backfield objective and let the rest of your army do whatever they want. For infantry, we are going to be running our Exalted 8-bound as specifically 8-bound, with 2 Eviscerators and 1 Lacerator. The 8-bound are going to be able to give out an aura of reroll wounds to everything within a close proximity to them, making them not only a good combat unit, but also a good support unit. With the 2 Rhinos, we're going to be taking the Havoc Launchers and the Combi Weapons, and we're going to be putting in one of the 10-man Khorne Berserker units and one of the 5-man Khorne Berserker units. As we move into 1500 points for this list, we're going to be picking up the 2nd Combat Patrol, and that's going to be it for this one. From the 2nd Combat Patrol, we're going to be adding back in a Lord on Juggernaut in addition to the Lord Invocatus that we had earlier. We're going to be adding in 2 additional 10-man Berserker units with Icon, Chainblade, the whole deal. The biggest thing that's going to be happening here is now we're going to be putting 2 10-mans into the Rhinos, one of which will have the Master of Execution with the Berserker Glaive. The 3rd Khorne Berserker unit that is not inside of a Rhino is going to be going with the World Eater's Lord on Juggernaut in order to move around the board and kind of be that extra oomph that's getting up into your opponent's face. They're going to be able to scout move because of Lord Invocatus, thankfully, and so they're going to be a lot more mobile than you might expect. Now, when it comes to the 2,000 point list, this is going to be another easy one. We're just going to be picking up Angron, and that is it. Because it's such a very small adjustment to the list, really the only thing that's happening here is Angron is getting added in, and we're going to be adding in a 2nd 10-man Jackal unit. The rest of the game plan is going to be staying very similar, with lots of units going off in different directions and doing different things, while the 8-bound are able to support the primary 10-man Berserker unit with the Master of Executions, but now also being able to support Angron. Now, I do want to mention one thing real quick. If you want to make this list even cheaper, but make it substantially less effective, in my opinion, what you're going to do is you're going to take the 2 Rhinos out, you're going to take a 2nd unit of Exalted 8-bound in, and you're going to be running those Exalted 8-bound and everything else on foot. This is going to make the army a lot slower, but it does save you quite a bit of money when it comes to actually building out the list. That change is going to wind up looking like Exalted 8-bound with 2 Chain Fists, 2 Eviscerator, and 1 paired Chain Fist. Now, Exalted 8-bound are going to be your premier anti-tank unit other than maybe Angron himself. So that doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be a weak list. It's just not going to have Rhinos. Now, if you're willing to put in a little bit of extra money and you want to get a much more powerful list, in my opinion, we're going to be going down a 2nd route that is a little bit more focused on 8-bound. We're going to be picking up 2 boxes of Exalted 8-bound and 1 Master of Execution. This list, just like the list before it, is going to be running Lord Invocatus and the Master of Executions with the Berserker Glaive. The Master of Execution with Berserker Glaive is still going to be going with the 10-man unit that is going to be getting moved up the board by Lord Invocatus with a scout move. But in what we're actually going to be changing the most is that Exalted 8-bound unit that, once again, is going to have 2 Chain Fists, Eviscerator, and paired Chain Fist. This is going to be that awesome anti-tank unit for you at that 1,000 point threshold where you might not have any other actual answers. At 1,500 points, we're going to be picking up 3 more boxes of Exalted 8-bound and 1 Chaos Rhino. Now, we're going to be doing a bit of a mix with these Exalted 8-bound and the regular 8-bound, but we do just need to make sure that we have the 5 boxes by this point. When we look at the list itself, not a whole lot is changing. We're still going to have a Rhino with a Havoc Launcher and a Combi Bolter for the 10 Khorne Berserkers and the Master of Executions and blah, 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 blah. You've already heard me talk about that a few times. The big thing that we're going to be having here is we're going to be having 3 separate 3-man groups of 8-bound with the Eviscerators and Lacerators, and 1 6-man Exalted 8-bound unit with 5 Chain Fists, 5 Eviscerators, and 1 paired Chain Fist. The 6-man Exalted 8-bound unit is still going to be that really massive powerhouse unit, but with 3 separate units of regular 8-bound, we're going to be able to spread that re-rolling wounds aura around and making sure that more of our army is properly supported. It's also going to allow us to layer in auras of reroll to wound back into that 6-man Exalted 8-bound unit so that they can be threatening every single turn after turn after turn after turn. As we finally move into 2,000 points on the second list, we're going to be picking up Angron and a second Chaos Rhino. Angron is going to do what Angron does in the army. He's going to run up to things and hit them really, really hard. And the second Rhino is going to do what the second Rhino does, and it's going to carry around a second Khorne Berserker squad. We're still going to be having 1 Khorne Berserker squad running around on foot just so that they can kind of get into little nooks and crannies and move around the board, keep all of our eggs from being in one basket. And the Exalted 8-bound are still going to just move up the board quick with Lord Invocatus' aura of Scout Move and just really, really hammer in our opponent's face quick and hard. Now, if you're looking to make this a much more competitive list, I'm going to have a couple of fully competitive tournament winning lists in the description. The biggest thing that you're going to note is that they are all running Karn the Betrayer in addition to lots of 8-bound Rhinos and Berserkers. I just don't have Karn in any of these lists because he's a little bit pricier compared to what you're going to pick up with the rest of the stuff, and I'd rather that you have the support and the tools for the rest of the army before we start looking at things like Karn. Now, because we've been able to put together a few different World Eaters lists that have been able to be quite a bit under 750, and we really only have the one list that's over 750, I'm still going to be slotting the World Eaters into the $600 to $750 tier, just below the Chaos Space Marines. But that's all that I have for you today. The World Eaters overall are a very simple army to build thanks to the small number of units they have and how well balanced the armies in the unit are amongst each other. There's really not a wrong way to go with World Eaters as long as you're picking up some combination of 8-bound and Berserkers and named characters. Throw them together in whatever mash you want and you'll probably find some level of success. I hope you liked the slight variations between these two lists, and thank you for watching. If you are interested in seeing more, I'll be having an Imperium video come out sometime within the next week.